And for more on that summit, TRT World's Europe correspondent Francis Collings joins me from Taormina in Italy. Francis.
Thank you very much indeed. Yes, the issue of climate change, combating greenhouse gases is very much on the agenda here, because when it comes to other important issues at this venue, namely the fight against, say, global terrorism, the leaders tend to be more or less on the same page, give or take some details. But of course, Donald Trump is a man who, before he was president, did say that he was against the Paris Accord, the 2015 agreement on greenhouse gases, and he once called climate change, global warming, a hoax. But behind closed doors, of course, there are discussions, and to work out just exactly how this all works and how they actually come to any sort of accord on any issue, let's get the expert view of Dr. Tristan Naylor, who's a lecturer in diplomatic studies at Oxford University. Tristan, tell me, how does this summit differ from the others?
Well, I think that there are two key ways that today's summit is very different from those, certainly in recent history. First and foremost, 4 of the 7 national leaders are completely new. They've never been to a G7 summit as leaders before. This is only the second time in history that this has happened. The last time was 1981. The second big difference is that tomorrow a number of African countries will be coming as invited guests of the G7. This is something that was done in the early noughties, but the Italian hosts are reviving this system. So in short, we've got very different faces around the G7 table this weekend.
Will it make that much of a difference, given that a lot of them do tend to have the same positions as some of their predecessors? You could say we have some establishment people here, notably like Justin Trudeau or Theresa May or the new French President Emmanuel Macron.
Well, sure. I mean, it's important to remember that the G7 as a group is a pretty cohesive, like-minded group of liberal democracies, right? And that's not going to change regardless of the individuals representing those countries. It's also important to remember that these summits aren't just things that happen over the course of a weekend, but are negotiated weeks and months in advance by diplomats and bureaucrats from each of the countries. So again, regardless of who happens to be around the table this weekend, there's a real status quo inertia to these things.
But of course, we should discuss the fact that there is an air of unpredictability, namely because of the election of Donald Trump as the American president. No one really seems to be sure where he thinks on quite a few issues.
This is one of the great diplomatic challenges of interacting with the new American president. The American president often contradicts himself, let alone his senior cabinet ministers, on any given day. And so this is really, really difficult for the other leaders, for the other foreign ministries to get a really good reading on what is American foreign policy on any given issue. This is a real diplomatic problem for the others, and indeed, I would say, a diplomatic vulnerability for the American government.
The issue of climate change, which he, of course, has indicated that he is against with regards the Paris Agreement. He said he would pull out of it prior to becoming the American president. They do say, the American contingent that's here, that they won't be making any statements, won't be making any decisions. But will we get an indication of where they think or what they think on this issue?
It is very unlikely that we're going to see any clear language coming out in the final summit document, the communique about the Paris Accord. But what we are likely to see is at least a better indication of quite what American policy is on climate change in the Paris Accord. This is the first time that the Americans will be forced to show their hand, even just a little bit. And that's really what we should be looking for at the end of this summit, an indication of which way the wind is blowing for the current administration.
Okay, Dr. Tristan Naylor, thank you very much indeed for your insight into how it works diplomatically and what we can possibly expect when these statements and the communiques come out after the bilateral discussions between the various leaders, the G7 leaders, and of course representatives from the European Union here in Sicily at the G7 summit. Back to you.